What I really want to try to achieve here is to make Mars seem possible, make it seem as though it's something that we can do in our lifetimes, and that you can go. And is there really a way that anyone could go if they wanted to? I think that's really the important thing. There are really two fundamental paths. History is going to bifurcate along two directions. One path is we stay on Earth forever, and then there will be some eventual extinction event. The alternative is to become a spacefaring civilization and a multi-planet species, which I hope you would agree that is the right way to go. Yes? So how do we figure out how to take you to Mars? And create a self-sustaining city, a city that is not merely an outpost, but could become a planet in its own right, and for us, thus we could become a truly multi-planet species. Why Mars? So our options for becoming a multi-planet species within our solar system are limited. Venus is a high-pressure, super high-pressure hot acid bath. Mercury is also way too close to the Sun. We could go potentially on one of the moons of Jupiter or Saturn, but those are quite far out, much further from the Sun, a lot harder to get to. It really leaves us with one option if we want to become a multi-planet civilization, and that's Mars. In general, Mars is far better suited to ultimately scale up to be a self-sustaining civilization. So just to give some comparison between the two planets, that they're remarkably close in a lot of ways. In fact, we now believe that early Mars was a lot like Earth. And in fact, if we could warm Mars up, we would once again have a thick atmosphere and liquid oceans. So still decent sunlight. It's a little cold, but we can warm it up. It has a very helpful atmosphere, which in the case of Mars being primarily CO2 with some nitrogen and argon and a few other trace elements, means that we can grow plants on Mars just by compressing the atmosphere. And it has nitrogen too, which is also very important for growing plants. It would be quite fun to be on Mars because you'd have gravity, which is about 37% that of Earth. So you'd be able to lift heavy things and bound around and have a lot of fun. And the day is remarkably close to that of Earth. And so we just need to change that bottom row, because currently we have 7 billion people on Earth and 0 on Mars. There's no intersection of sets of people who want to go and can afford to go. In fact, right now you cannot go to Mars for infinite money. Taking sort of an Apollo-style approach, an optimistic cost number would be about $10 billion a person. And if we can get the cost of moving to Mars to be roughly equivalent to a median house price in the US, which is around $200,000, then I think the probability of establishing a self-sustaining civilization is very high. I think it would almost certainly occur. Not everyone would want to go. In fact, I think a relatively small number of people from Earth would want to go, but enough would want to go and who could afford the trip that it would happen. People could get sponsorship. It gets to the point where almost anyone, if they saved up and this was their goal, they could ultimately save up enough money to buy a ticket and move to Mars. And Mars would have a labor shortage for a long time, so jobs would not be in short supply. So it is a bit tricky because we have to figure out how to improve the cost of trips to Mars by 5 million%. These are the key elements that are needed in order to achieve the 4.5 order of magnitude improvement. Full reusability is really the super hard one. Refilling in orbit is one of the essential elements of this. Without refilling in orbit, you would have a half order of magnitude impact roughly on the cost. Not refilling in orbit would mean a 500% roughly increase in the cost per ticket. It also allows us to build a smaller vehicle and lower the development cost. It's very important for reducing the susceptibility of the system to a performance shortfall. So it really wouldn't make sense to leave your spaceships on Mars. You really want to build a propellant plant on Mars and send the ships back. And Mars happens to work out well for that because it has a CO2 atmosphere, it's got water ice in the soil, and with H2O and CO2, you can produce CH4, methane, and oxygen O2. So picking the right propellant is also important. The energy cost on Mars of producing and storing hydrogen is very high. So when we looked at the overall system optimization, it was clear to us that, that methane actually was the clear winner. The best way to optimize the cost per unit mass to Mars and back is to use an all-methane system, or technically deep cryomethalogs.
There's nothing to eat.
What you saw there is really quite close to what we will actually build. The simulation was actually made from the SpaceX engineering CAD models. So this is not, it's not just, well, this is what it might look like. This is what we plan to try to make it look like. You'd ultimately have, I think, upwards of 1,000 or more spaceships waiting in orbit. And so that the Mars colonial fleet would depart en masse. They're kind of like Battlestar Galactica. We've seen that thing. That's a good show. If we say like say a minimum threshold for a self-sustaining city on Mars or civilization would be 1 million people, well, and you can only go every 2 years. If you have 100 people per ship, that's 10,000 trips. It's probably somewhere between maybe 40 to 100 years to achieve a fully self-sustaining civilization on Mars. So this is designed to be autonomously pressurized, which means that the fuel and the oxygen, we gasify them through heat exchanges in the engine and use that to pressurize the tanks. So we'll gasify the methane and use that to pressurize the fuel tank, gasify the oxygen, use that to pressurize the oxygen tank. And this is a much simpler system than what we have with Falcon 9. We decided to start off the development with what we think are probably the two most difficult elements of the design. One is the Raptor engine, this is going to be the highest chamber pressure engine of any kind ever built, and probably the highest thrust to weight. So you don't need the booster if you have a lower gravity well. So no booster is needed on the Moon or Mars or any of the moons of Jupiter or Pluto. You just need the spaceship. The booster is just there for heavy gravity wells. There's 7 engines in the center cluster. Those would be the ones that move for steering the rocket, and the other ones would be fixed in position, which gives us the best concentration of we can max out the number of engines because we don't have to leave any room for gimbaling or moving the engine. This is all designed so that you could actually lose multiple engines, and the goal is at least 100 passengers per ship, although I think ultimately we'll probably see that number grow to 200 or more. This chart's a little difficult to interpret at first, but we decided to put it there for people who want to watch the video afterwards and sort of take a closer look, analyze some of the numbers. I mean, in order to make it appealing and increase that portion of the Venn diagram of people who actually want to go, it's got to be really fun and exciting, and it can't feel cramped or boring. So the crew compartment or the occupant compartment is set up so that you can do zero-G games, you can float around. There'll be like movies, lecture halls, cabins, a restaurant. It'll be like really fun to go. You're gonna have a great time. The ingredients are there on Mars to create a propellant plant with relative ease. The trickiest thing really is the energy source, which we think we can do with a large field of solar panels. So funding. We thought about funding sources, and so we could steal underpants, launch satellites, send cargo to the space station, Kickstarter, of course, followed by profit. We do expect to generate pretty decent net cash flow from launching lots of satellites and servicing the space station from NASA, transferring cargo to and from space station, and then I know that there's a lot of people in the private sector who are interested in helping fund a base on Mars, and then perhaps there will be interest on the government sector side to also do that. Ultimately, this is going to be a huge public-private partnership, and I think that's how the United States was established, and many other countries around the world is a public-private partnership. So I think that's probably what occurs. And right now we're just trying to make as much progress as we can with the resources that we have available, and just sort of keep moving ball forward, and hopefully I think as we show that this is possible, that this dream is real, not just a dream, it's something that can be made real, I think the support will snowball over time. And I should say also the main reason I'm personally accumulating assets is in order to fund this. So I really don't have any other motivation for personally accumulating assets except to be able to make the biggest contribution I can to making life multiplanetary. Timelines. I'm not the best at this sort of thing. But just to show you where we started off, in 2002, SpaceX basically consisted of carpet and a mariachi band. That was it. That's all of SpaceX in 2002. As you can see, I'm a dancing machine. That was what we started off with in 2002. And really, I mean, I thought we had maybe a 10% chance of doing anything, of even getting a rocket to orbit, let alone getting beyond that and taking Mars seriously. But I came to the conclusion that if there wasn't some new entrant into the space arena with a strong ideological motivation, then it didn't seem like we were on a trajectory to ever be a spacefaring civilization and be out there among the stars. Because in '69 we were able to go to the moon, and the space shuttle could get to low Earth orbit, and then obviously the space shuttle got retired, but that trend line is down to zero. So I think what a lot of people don't appreciate is that technology does not automatically improve. It only improves if a lot of really strong engineering talent is applied to the problem that it improves. And there are many examples in history where civilizations have reached a certain technology level and then have fallen well below that, and then recovered only millennia later. So we go from 2002, where we basically were clueless, and had our first attempt at launch in 2006, which failed. 2006, followed by a lot of grief, and then finally the fourth launch of Falcon 1 worked in 2008, and we were really down to our last pennies. In fact, I only thought I had enough money for 3 launches, and the first 3 bloody failed. And we were able to scrape together enough to just barely make it and do a 4th launch. And thank goodness that 4th launch succeeded in 2008. That was a lot of pain. Delivered and returned cargo from the space station. 2013 is when we first started doing vertical takeoff and landing tests. And then 2014 is when we were able to have the first orbital booster do a soft landing in the ocean. The landing was soft, it fell over and exploded, but the landing, for 7 seconds, it was good. 2015, well, last year, in December, that was definitely one of the best moments of my life, when the rocket booster came back and landed at Cape Canaveral. So that was really, yeah. Yeah, and then 2016, we also demonstrated landing on a ship. The landing on the ship is important for the very high-velocity geosynchronous missions. We could transport cargo to anywhere on Earth in 45 minutes at the longest. So most places on Earth would be maybe 20, 25 minutes. So maybe if we had a floating platform off the coast of New York, say 20, 30 miles out, you could go from New York to Tokyo in, I don't know, 25 minutes. Trying to put it all together and make this actually work for Mars. If things go super well, it might be kind of in the 10-year time frame. There's a huge amount of risk. It's going to cost a lot. Good chance we don't succeed, but we're going to do our best. Oh, and we're going to try to send something to Mars on every Mars rendezvous from here on out. So Dragon 2, which is a propulsive lander, we plan to send to Mars in a couple of years, and then do probably another Dragon mission in 2020. In fact, we want to establish a steady cadence that there's always a flight leaving, like it's a train leaving the station. With every Mars rendezvous, we will be sending a Dragon, at least a Dragon to Mars, and ultimately the big spaceship. So if there are people that are interested in putting payloads on Dragon, you can count on a ship that's going to transport something on the order of at least 2 or 3 tons of useful payload to the surface of Mars. That's part of the reason why we designed Dragon 2 to be a propulsive lander, is as a propulsive lander you can go anywhere in the solar system. Wings, you can pretty much only land on Earth because you need a runway, and most places don't have a runway. And then any place that doesn't have a dense atmosphere, you can't use parachutes. But propulsive works anywhere. I just want to say thanks to the Raptor team for really working 7 days a week to try to get this done in advance of the presentation. Because I really wanted to show that we've made some hardware progress in this direction. It's kind of interesting to see the Mach diamonds forming. The Raptor, although it has 3 times the thrust of a Merlin, is actually only about the same size as a Merlin engine because it has 3 times the operating pressure. We're currently producing Merlin engines at almost 300 per year. So we understand how to make rocket engines in volume. That's the other thing we wanted to focus on, was the Raptor, and then building the first development tank for the Mars spaceship. So then what about beyond Mars? So as we thought about the system, and the reason we call it a system, because generally I don't like calling things systems because everything's a system, including your dog, is that it's actually more than a vehicle. There's obviously the rocket booster, the spaceship, the tanker, and the propellant plant, the in situ propellant production. If you have all of those 4 elements, you can actually go anywhere in the solar system by planet hopping or moon hopping. So by establishing a propellant depot in the asteroid belt or on one of the moons of Jupiter, you can make flights from Mars to Jupiter no problem. In fact, even without a propellant depot at Mars, you can do a flyby of Jupiter without a propellant depot. But by establishing a propellant depot, let's say Enceladus or Europa or any of there's a few options, and then doing another one on Titan, Saturn's moon, and then perhaps another one further out on Pluto or elsewhere in the solar system. This system really gives you freedom to go anywhere you want in the greater solar system. So you can actually travel out to the Kuiper Belt, to the Oort cloud. I wouldn't recommend this for interstellar journeys, but this basic system, provided we have filling stations along the way, means full access to the entire greater solar system.